Welcome back to our Ardenwood Presents 3-month webinar series on the timeless blessings of planned giving. Today is the Q&A portion on legacy planning. I'm John Mitchell and I serve as Executive Director and CEO of Ardenwood here in San Francisco. Thank you for joining us today. We offer these webinar presentations and follow-up Q&A sessions like this afternoon to support you through the estate planning process. Please be in touch with us with any questions that come up after these webinars. We want them to be useful to you. Our contact information will appear at the end of this presentation. As always, the content shared today is only informational and is not intended to be legal advice. A replay of this presentation will be available on our website later this week. We had a great session on Tuesday, and now let me reintroduce Rick Bailey. Rick is the founder and chairman of Camas and is one of the most highly renowned estate planners in the United States. He's a certified financial planner, or CFP, with a master's degree in accountancy and taxation, as well as a Juris Doctorate, or JD, again, think lawyer. Rick Bailey works with private clients, CPAs, attorneys, financial advisors, and life insurance professionals. In other words, he is happy to work with you. Let me remind you that you can submit questions using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will answer a few today from last week and any that you submit this afternoon during our Q&A session. I've got them right here, Rick. I'll turn it over to you. So can I throw you the first question?
All right.
Excellent. Thank you. When is the best time to do legacy planning?
I think the best time is, honestly, was yesterday. Probably the next best is now. It really is. The sooner you can start, the better the results are. A lot of the planning, I would say some of the tools that we can use in the planning process, the more time we have to, to do the plan, the better off the result's going to be. So don't put it off. I think a lot of people, think it's something I'm going to do when I'm older. And, it's one, honestly, somebody passes away and they wish they, had done it. The family wishes they had put something together. You know what the problems are, you can solve them. And, I don't think there's a problem that's so complicated we can't get the right solution if we take the time to do it right. So start it as soon as you can is probably the best way to put that.
I love it. We had a conversation before we went live today, and you were telling us about a situation where, the parents, you said, I see it as from your legal standpoint and professional background, you said to your clients, I see a potential problem here. And so you need to tell, you parents need to tell your kids what you planned. And they did. And that's just neat how, you emphasize how important it is that everyone be on the same page as much as possible in this planning. You've developed a plan, but then you need to share it so that there aren't surprises.
Well, I think if there's surprises, what I've seen, and I've helped through the probate process and been there after the fact. And, kids, mom and dad, may have said something, promised something, and, at least insinuated that their plan was going to be a certain way and it wasn't. And they're offended. The kids are offended or their feelings are hurt. Who are they really upset with? Mom and dad. But mom and dad aren't there. Who are they going to take it out on? Siblings. So I've seen multiple times where families have been torn apart. Kids are not talking to each other anymore. I've got some friends in Colorado. The son thought he was doing a great job, helping out with mom's estate. He did something, that it really was really a minor issue. and his sister hasn't talked to him for the last 15 years. You know, those problems can get solved. And there again, explain to, you know, if things are not, I'll just say, if they're not equal to the kids, is there a reason why? Put a letter with your documents that explain what your thoughts were. So you can explain it. So it's coming from mom and dad. This is our thoughts of why we did it this way. And now you've explained it perfect. Now the kids can move on and hopefully keep those family relationships going strong forever.
Exactly. Beautiful, beautifully stated. Next up, what makes a good estate planning attorney?
I think experience. You know, when I look at the attorneys, I mean, you know, I'd say go open up the yellow pages and look at the list of attorneys and what they specialize in. We don't have yellow pages anymore. But if you know, what I find is most attorneys say they do estate planning. The problem is very few of them actually do it on a regular basis. You know, you don't want somebody that they're experimenting on you. You want somebody that's got the experience to help you, you know, foresee what maybe some of the problems would be. And, you know, don't be their practice case, their practice client. So make sure that you've got somebody that really has experience doing estate planning. Somebody that can maybe help you if you've got tax issues in your estate plan, if you've got trust issues that need to be, you know, different types of trust, different types of planning, if you've got business elements there. Really, you want somebody that can help spot those issues before they become a problem. I'm helping on a case in California right now, a planning case. The attorney put things together about 5 years ago, and now the client felt like there was maybe some problems, so they've asked for us to step in and review everything. And I've gone back and talked to their attorney, and I've pointed out some problems, and a lot of them are going to be tax issues. And he said, well, I don't give any advice on tax issues. But I said, you're the one that put the plan together, and now it's a problem. But at least now, I'll say in that case, you know, we've spotted the problem. We can fix most of it. It won't be perfect, but it will be fixed as good as we can. But that was something that probably wouldn't have been resolved for years or ever. And I've got another case that I got brought in on that we're going through, and I reviewed their existing documents. There again, the attorney was a good business attorney, maybe not a good estate planning attorney. And one of the things I noticed as I read through, the husband had not included his wife in his trust planning. So she was not a beneficiary of anything that he passed on. It would pass to their kids, but not to her. You know, whoops. And it's been like that for over 10 years. So luckily we caught that before it became a problem.
My goodness, yeah.
So you want somebody that's good and really is, if you think about it as a partner in your planning, and that's what you're after, is somebody that can help you through the process. It's not, you know, sometimes it's an emotional process. Sometimes there are things that are a big concern. But if you've got a good partner helping you with the plan, they'll spot those issues and help you resolve them.
Excellent. You know, in many professions, you ask for references. Could you, if you really don't know someone in your area or whatever, is it practice to go to someone you've looked up on a internet or something like that, and that have good reviews, but say, can you, if they don't have current references, maybe can you provide me with a couple of people I can talk to about what it was like working with you? Does that go on?
It happens some. I think one of the concerns I have there is the privacy. You know, I've worked with a lot of clients that you know, their affairs are private. They just don't want people to know what they have, and so that does become an issue. But, we usually can resolve that with the client when we work with them. But yeah, you want to work with somebody that has the right reputation.
Exactly. Next question. I have a revocable trust. Can I do more to protect my assets?
Yes. And it really comes back to a couple things there. The answer is yes, you can probably do more. It's like we talked about on the previous webinar, the revocable trust is the foundation of the plan. And think about building that dream home. Do we need to do more to protect the assets? Now, what I look at there is what assets do you have? It's not as much the total value of all your assets. That's not what I'm mostly concerned about when I'm building the plan. It's what assets do you have? How are they owned? What are you doing with them? But if you start looking at it, state law provides a lot of protection, but not so much protection that all of your assets are going to be 100% protected from creditors. So the answer is yes, we can do more. It's really going to depend on what your assets are.
Exactly. Question. Will this type of planning complicate my life?
Yes and no. It's going to make it different. What I always look at, if you think about the planning we're looking at, this is to create peace of mind. So, if you think about it, I don't want you waking up in the middle of the night with cold sweats that you've got buyer's remorse and did something wrong. Number one, we want to take our time in the planning process for you to think through, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And then from a complexity standpoint, there again, the more assets you have, maybe the more, the higher your net worth, those bring more complexity into it. But my goal is always to keep it as simple as possible. And really my goal is I want you to be able to draw this out on a piece of paper for your friends and neighbors. If they ask you, what do you have? If you can't draw it out on the paper, then we probably need to go back and do a little bit more education. Because, I find if the individual client doesn't understand what they have, then they're not going to abide by the rules. And there are rules that we need to make sure are followed as we build the plan and keep that plan in place throughout the years. But there again, we want it very, very easy to do. Easy to upkeep, easy to amend and change. There again, a little bit more complicated maybe than where you're at now, but not much.
With that in mind, is a follow-on in terms of how often should one review their estate plan?
I always say review it every year. Pull it, you don't have to go back and read it every year. What I always say is, at least, pull it off the shelf, blow the dust off of it, hold it in your hand and think, has anything changed this year that might affect my planning? Has there, have I bought assets that haven't been included in my plan? Have, family things changed, this year? If you think about it, you're going to know what those big items probably are. Now, this is coming back to that partnership with your planning team. Is if I see something from my side that's going to affect your plan, you're going to get a phone call from me. If there's a tax law change, a state law change, if there's something that we need to improve, then you're going to get a phone call. And I'd like to talk to my clients at least once a year, if not more, so that we just keep that ongoing dialogue of, is this doing what you want it to do? And, because I guarantee, especially over time, if you think about it, and we talked about this, I think on Tuesday, the average estate plan is reviewed every 19.2 years. And think about that. Where was your life 19.2 years ago? I've seen people that have done their planning, when they first got married. And the next time they looked at it, the kids, they not only had kids, they've raised their kids and their kids are off to school or out of the house. And now they're looking at their plan again. Think about all those things that happened over those years that if they had passed away, whoops, we've got a problem. And if you've created, if you have a problem, just think who's going to step in and fix that. And the answer is it's the court, but there again, we don't know what personality we're dealing with, what their agenda is. So we just want to always keep it up to date, but keeping it up to date is probably the easy part.
Exactly. Next up, is there an age where this type of planning doesn't make sense?
No, it really comes down to, I've worked with clients in their 80s and up that it's the first time they've ever done their planning. And if you think about it, it's the same problems. There again, I don't care if you're 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. When you pass away, if you don't make those decisions, the state made the decisions for you. They're going to tell you who it goes to. They're going to distribute it no matter what. There again, is that what you want? Do you want to take it to chance that hopefully it worked out? You've worked hard. You've worked hard for what you've have. But it's there again, we've talked about it's not just the assets that we're passing on, it's how we pass it on. Are we creating a burden or a blessing? And I go back to 70% of lottery winners are lost the money within 5 years. Why? Because they didn't appreciate it. They didn't understand it. They weren't equipped for it. So even though you might be older and your kids are older, are they equipped for what's going to be passed on, and can you do better? And we just always want to do a little bit better in the planning process.
Yes, love it. Next up, what happens if we set up this plan and then we retire in another state? That's
happens all the time. It's one I work with a lot of clients from New York that magically end up in Florida for their retirement years. It is one where we want to go back and review it, but most of the times the changes are very minimal. Where I see some of the bigger problems, like if you're in a state that's a community property state and you go to a non-community property state, we just want to make sure that everything's accounted for the right way. Or if you've gone from a separate property state to a community property state, same thing. We just want to make sure that everything that you've moved and into that new state is accounted for. We just don't have a gap, but honestly, most of the time it's very minimal to no changes.
Great. We've touched on this on Tuesday, but great question. I've heard that probate isn't really that big a deal. Is it?
Yes and no. And it all comes down to you can honestly have an estate that doesn't end up in probate. So if you think about it, let's say you don't own your home, but you have retirement accounts, investment accounts, those bank accounts, you can put a beneficiary on those accounts. When you pass away, it automatically goes to whoever you named as beneficiary. It really is one, it's the makeup of your property, not so much the total value of your property that creates the problem. So I was on a call yesterday with a new client, not a large estate, or not a large value in the property they own, but they happen to own property in 4 different states. And they live on the border of 4 different states or close to it. So they've purchased property in 4 different areas. There again, not a huge value, but here's the problem. That's 4 probates, because you have to probate the state where the property is. And so there again, you've got 4 times the cost of what might not have been a big problem. In a lot of states, they do have good probate laws to move things along fast and easy, especially between spouses. But you also open it up to, potentially other creditors being notified and coming in. You've opened it up to potentially, children contesting things. It just becomes a messier process than it needs to be.
Great point. Next question. I am single and have a modest net worth. I own my home, a rental home, and have money invested. I have a will, but not a trust. I want to make sure I take care of my daughter and give the rest to charities. Do I need an estate plan?
You actually have started your estate plan. So with that will, the will is part of the estate plan process. There again, if you have just a will, you're going to end up in probate. So your daughter's going to be exposed to that time delay and the cost. And there again, things going to the charity. That's a great part of your plan. What I would say is let's look at it and see if we can make it a little bit easier. So even going from a will to a revocable trust, there again, the distribution can all be the same. But the nice part of that is when you pass away, when mom passes away, or dad in this case, and it all goes to the daughter. Well, now if it's in a trust, the day mom or dad passes away, the daughter can step in and take control of that, or whoever's named as the next trustee. There's not that time gap. And there's not that, opening up everything so your neighbors can pry in and see. It's very private. Your wishes get done, but there again, you've already started in the planning process. All we look at is, can we do a little bit better so everything that you do is everything you want happens in an efficient manner.
Exactly. I just want to remind those that are online to send in your questions. At the bottom of your screen, you can see Q&A. If you'd like to type one in, please do so now. Next up, if I decide to do the legacy planning, how do I start?
I think the biggest thing, part of starting is, we're going to spend some time on, getting to know you. So part of that process is, of course, we have fact finders, questionnaires that we'll have for you to go through. We need to know what your assets are, and we need to know relative values of those assets so we can help you understand, is there any tax issues there? But then as we work through that process of understanding what you own, and now what your goals and objectives, there's such an emotional part of this plan. And I go back, if you look at a lot of this, the document part of this, I see a lot of attorneys that will come in and be very almost sterile in their approach. Tell me what you have and I'll put this plan in place and that's it. But there's an emotional part that we need to understand. What goals do you have? What objectives do you have in here? And can we take, what goals you have, and can we improve the plan to do a better job achieving those goals? Let me give you a good example. Let's say, go back to the prior one where it's all going to the daughter. And if it all goes to, the whole estate goes to the daughter that's not going to the charity, and she has a creditor waiting there for her. She's been sued, there's a judgment against her, and they keep renewing that judgment until she receives her inheritance. Now, when she receives that inheritance, they take it away because they've got a judgment that says they're entitled to that. So can we do better? Yeah, we can put it in trust for the daughter so that it's to take care of her. If we have a special needs child, we can put a trust there for that asset to go into the special needs trust to take care of that special needs child long term. You know, the other one that I see is, you know, think about that example with the daughter, and she gets the inheritance, and not long after that gets a divorce. Is the ex-spouse now entitled to part of that? And so we, you know, there again, we've got to understand where you're at, and then we can start moving into what type of plan is going to fit best. If you think about this, let's say I have a 50-page trust is what we put together for you. Do you really care about all 50 pages? Now, you may read all 50 pages, and that's a good thing for you to do. But if you think about that, I'll just say the things that are most important to the individual might be 5 to 10 pages. This is where what they want, who they want the property to go to. This is how they want it to go to them. That's part of that goal, objective, emotional part. The other 40 pages are there to make sure the 5 or 10 pages that matter work. So we want to make sure it works so that what you envision happens. So part of that process, you know, when you start the process, it's taking the time for us to know you. What do you want to accomplish? Because this is individualized. I always tell everybody, if you want the perfect estate plan, I can pull the binder off my shelf here in my office and show it to you. Now, that assumes that you have the same goals, objectives, family, assets, everything that I do. That's a perfect fit for me. It's probably not a perfect fit for anybody on this call. It might be close. It might be okay. We don't want close or okay. We want it right. And so it's taking the time to, you know, it's not off the shelf. It's customized for each individual. So if we're going to customize it in that process, let's take the time to find out, you know, for us to understand who you are and what you want to accomplish.
Yes, perfect. Well, given that in mind, can you give a ballpark in terms of what an estate plan would cost to put together, to get that notebook to put together?
It all depends. It really depends on you know, the size and makeup of your assets and what you're trying to accomplish. It can be on the low end, as low as maybe, you know, $2,000, $2,500, maybe a little bit less, to probably, you know, I've worked on some that are way up there, but it's one, you know, really it's probably on the lower end, you know, $2,000, $2,500 to, you know, get the ball started.
Okay, that's helpful. Can you give an example of how to communicate with family? What is, like, if you could be central casting, and or maybe that's not the right word, but in terms of how it should look, how the Leave It to Beaver example would play out in terms of for those that remember Leave It to Beaver, you know, how would that conversation go?
I think it comes. I think it's in part of the process. If you think about it, if let's just say I'm working with mom and dad, and we're going to go through with mom and dad figuring out what they want to have happen here. And because the planning's theirs, it's their assets. They're the ones, you know, deciding who to pass it to and how to pass it to them. Now, once they have that plan in place, what I like to do is, you know, number one, I think they should have a letter and update this, you know, keep this letter with their plan and update it every year. In that plan, it's the last thing the kids are going to see from mom and dad. This is what we're thinking. This is why we did, you know, the plan this way. This is our hopes and dreams for you. And I think that's powerful because that's, you know, that's the direction mom and dad as the matriarch and patriarch of the family are going to pass on. And then, you know, if there's complications in the plan, if there's something that's just odd, different, you know, where you know, there's 4 kids and they're giving, you know, most of it to one and very little to the other 3, which could be the right answer. There again, it's mom and dad's, you know, decision, so it's the right answer for them. But is that, at that point, I would like them to communicate that to all 4, so they know there again, that's coming from mom and dad, not one child's, you know, strong arming mom and dad to get more. And so the more communication we can have, but there again, it's mom and dad deciding on their time frame when and how to, you know, explain that to their kids or grandkids, whoever their heirs are, just so that it's clear. But it's got to be done in a very, I would say, personal, individualized way, so it's not uncomfortable. And I've had some of those meetings in my office. They've all been good meetings. You know, it's one where, you know, I've been, you know, it's like I work a lot in the farm communities. If you think about the farm, it's typical. If there's 3 kids, one of them stayed on the farm, the other 2 went off and got jobs that paid more money. At the end of the day, the child that stayed probably gets the farm. And now there's a reason for a disproportionate, you know, interest there. Not that we can't make it up with other assets, or this is where we might use life insurance to even up what's distributed. There's, you know, we can get to the right result. But there again, if there's anything different or odd in the planning, I want mom and dad to be the ones to explain it. Why did we do it this way? Hopefully more than just a letter, but at least in a letter, that the kids see that that's more important than the will and trust and all those documents. This is what mom and dad were thinking. This is the last thing they hear from them.
That's great. Actually, it's so interesting. That's the last question here. You've already, I guess, just answered it. It said, what do you feel about legacy letters? I mean, that.
I just think they're overlooked as probably a big part of this plan. There again, if you think about it, mom or dad just passed away. It's a very emotional time. You know, why didn't I get? Why did my sister get? Why did my brother get? You know, let's remove those issues from the table. There again, if mom and, you know, if I'm upset, if I'm one of the children, and I didn't get what I wanted, who am I really upset with? You know, dad promised me whatever, and I didn't get it. Who am I really upset with? Well, dad told me and I should have got it, but my brother got it. Well, there might have been a reason. You know, maybe dad told both of us and just forgot. But there again, if mom and dad aren't there, who am I going to be upset at? Well, the only person I can be upset with is the one sitting next to me. There again, it wasn't their decision. They were just, you know, received something that they didn't know that they were getting probably either. So I think it's that letter is, I think it's powerful in a very emotional time, because it can really diffuse the tension. Mom and dad, I mean, let's be honest, mom and dad know what the problems are. They know what most of those fights come from. They can resolve that with that letter of here's why I did certain things, and end of discussion. Now we move on and deal with the rest of it.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I don't see any questions in the Q&A section of the website here. So I think we're going to go ahead and close out. And thank you, Rick, for explaining legacy planning so clearly. It's just so helpful to talk these things through. Golly. Thank you. And thank you all again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again in October for the next 2 webinars on estate planning, and on the 4th and 6th of October for 2 webinars on Medicare for for Christian Scientists. Whoops, I'm reading this wrong. See you in October for the next 2 webinars on estate planning and for 2 webinars on Medicare for Christian Scientists on the 11th and 13th. There we go. And this will be all included on our website as well. Our last estate planning workshops will be on November 1st and 3rd. Also in November, we invite you to join us online for an online Bible workshop on health and healing presented by Evan McDonald on Saturday, November 5th. And finally, our annual Christmas celebration is Sunday afternoon, December 4th. We hope you, your family, and friends will join us again online. You can find details and register for all our online events on our website at ardenwood.org. So thank you again, and goodbye for now.
Thanks.